It's 20 years since the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix, a race famous for so many incidents and controversies, and of course a fantastic first win for Jordan with Damon Hill. I'm joined by James Allen and Stuart Codling to discuss that race and some of the key memories we all have from it. I think it's one of those races, James, that everybody remembers where they were when it happened. I was on a karting dummy grid when I heard someone talking about Damon Hill pulling a fast one. Now, the first thing that happened in that race, of course, was a huge pile-up at the start, triggered by David Coulthard. And in terms of where we were that day, I think actually that's a big memory for you, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it was our second year with ITV. I was working in the pits alongside the great Murray Walker and Martin Brundle. And as you say, DC, it was a horrible day. I mean, really wet and horrible. DC triggered the accident. I think 14 cars involved in it, something like that. And huge pile-up. And so I was on the spot, you know, that two-tier paddock at Spa. And I was, describing what I could see. I did 2 or 3 updates live into the programme. And then they were sort of tidying it all away. And I realised the clock was ticking. It was going to be a long afternoon. So I thought, actually, I might take advantage of the time here and go to the loo because I might not have a chance again for a while. So I go into this porter cabin, one of those plastic single porter cabins, slid the thing. And in those days, you used to have to wear a one-piece fire suit to work in the pit lane. So I won't do too graphic a description of the picture, but you can imagine the situation. And all of a sudden, completely unprompted, Murray threw to me. So I was like, where's my microphone? So I reached down, picked my microphone up, and I have no idea what I said. But I came up with something to update. Pretty tight situation, Murray. I don't know, something. It was just classic Murray. Sometimes he did that. It was a joy to work with him. But I'll never forget that memory.
Well, just one of the amazing untold stories, I think, of that pile-up is iconic, isn't it, Stuart? Everyone's got the image of the car just one after the other seemingly piling in. Well, I think Ralf Schumacher actually pulled over in the pit exit and waited and let it all happen in front of him. But there were cars going off everywhere, wheels flying everywhere. It's just unthinkable, really, to have an accident like that.
Pretty much. I mean, you saw DC sort of spin and then hit the wall and rebound back into the path of everyone. And of course, they were then driving into that in this huge ball of spray. And having been in the back of the 2-seat Formula One car in the wet at Spa, I can tell you it's not really very much fun seeing all that coming towards you.
And wheels flying everywhere, which you wouldn't see today. You know, got wheel tethers now. That couldn't happen. But when you watch the clip and there's wheels and bits of suspension, it was a very, very dangerous situation. And don't forget, that's also where in those days the F3000 pits were down the left-hand side there.
Yeah. Coulthard was, of course, involved in the next big incident or controversy later in the race when, running as a backmarker effectively, he tried to pull over to let Michael Schumacher through, and blinded by the spray that you were just mentioning there, Stuart, Michael slams into the back of him. Another famous moment, and Murray Walker's commentary actually was very iconic for that as well. And James, I think you were out of the Portaloo by this point and in the pit lane when Michael storms down the pit lane looking for DC, effectively to have a fight with him.
Yeah, I mean, and Michael was having one of those great races in the wet, which he did very often. Hakkinen had been on pole, he'd messed up the restart and spun, which meant it was Michael and Damon. Damon obviously took the advantage. Michael, beautiful pass up in the bus stop to get ahead of him, controlling the race, and all of a sudden DC's on the racing line but is told by the team to slow down. Jean Todt's gone down to Ron Dennis and saying, make sure you tell him to pull over. I mean, it was real tense stuff because they were fighting for a world championship, those two teams. Bang! Off comes the front wheel. And as you say, Michael comes back to the pits. DC thinks he's retiring. Actually, he did go back out and did finish, I think, 7th in the end. But so Michael comes into the pits and I'm outside the Ferrari garage because I'm sort of commenting on the car coming in and blah, blah, blah. He pops out of the thing and all of a sudden comes shooting past me. And I know where he's going. He's going to go and try and take David's head off. And of course, there's Stefano Domenicali, who's now became a team principal and then is now the CEO of Lamborghini, holding on to Michael and trying to can't hold him back. He's so incandescent. He goes up to the McLaren garage and tries to take David's head off. But this massive McLaren mechanic, I can't remember his name, stops him. It's funny because Senna had tried to do the same thing to Michael a few years earlier in testing. So it was funny to see Michael doing the same thing today.
It's also tricky because you run up against that problem you have as a racing driver when you want to punch another racing driver in the face when they're still wearing a crash helmet. All you can kind of do is do that, or you do the PK and Salazar and do the little karate kick.
Do we think that eventually Michael did forgive DC or did realise that maybe he didn't do it on purpose?
Well, I was writing a book with Michael at the time called The Quest for Redemption. It was all about what had happened the year before, taking Villeneuve out. And I know for a fact from him and from Ross, it was a very, very long time before he would accept that DC didn't do that on purpose. Because you've got to remember, McLaren and Ferrari, I mean, there's all the suspicion. There was accusations of, you know, launch control and this, that and the other, and dodgy software. I mean, it really was a very, very hostile environment between the two of them. So there was a lot of suspicion.
Now that incident, of course, paved the way for Damon to retake the lead. He was competitive that weekend. I think he qualified third, if I remember correctly. He's back in the lead. I think there's a safety car and Ralph ends up on his tail. Jordan, people have said since that Ralph had a bit more of a wet setup that weekend, so that was why Damon was particularly worried about Ralph's pace. And there's a very famous radio message from Damon, which is directed really right into the ear of Eddie Jordan, saying, if you want to win this race, call it off between Ralph and I, because I think everybody was scared at that point that if Ralph goes for it and there's a collision, Jordan not only lose their first win, but a 1-2.
Yeah, and it's the sort of situation you don't really want to have as a team principal. And I can only imagine what EJ will have gone through on the pit wall as he sort of contemplated all the permutations of that. And as you say, Damon phrased it very carefully, which is not a let me through or we crash. It is very much a let me stay where I am or we will crash.
But I think it was also a little bit of inexperience, a bit of weakness on Eddie's side. You know, he desperately wanted that first win. It had been presented to him on a plate because obviously, you know, running 1 and 2, all the big names are out of the race. And Ralph is quicker, and so he says to Damon, let him through, or, you know, the team say let him through, which is, you know, crazy. Damon's the lead guy. Ralph will have his day in the future, as he did. He went on to win Grand Prix. As a story, a 1-2 like that. So I think Damon did exactly the right thing, and of course it turned out to be his last Grand Prix. And going back to the championship situation, don't forget that of course Häkkinen won that championship.
And what did you make of the reaction in the pit lane afterwards? We all remember the iconic moments of EJ sort of dancing down the pit lane and that sort of thing. You would have been in the thick of that, of course.
Yeah.
What was it like down there?
Well, it was great, you know, and it had been quite a long time coming, and they went on to have a bit more success over the next couple of years. It was good to see. I mean, I'd been at Donington in '93, another wet, famous race where Senna was amazing on that opening lap, and Rubens I think he was on for second place, wasn't he? And I did an interview with Eddie about how great this was going to be, and then the car broke down literally as soon as we finished the interview. So he became very, very, very superstitious after that, and he would not do any form of interviews with anybody until the race was finished when he was in a good position. So he wasn't talking to Louise Goodman or myself, but he certainly had a lot to say after the race.
Did he used to hide when he saw you coming?
No, he just went, well, we just knew anyway, but he just used to go like this.
Fantastic memories from a fantastic Grand Prix that has gone down in F1 folklore. Let us know your memories of that race. It's one that I think all fans resonate with. And be sure to look out for more videos from Autosport and from motorsport.com, and keep an eye on this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix and all of our coverage across our various platforms.